The Free Cities community seems very much more buttoned up and more pragmatic. And then network state community, there's a lot more dreamers, but there's a convergence in between. So I think that middle convergence is actually a very interesting group of people, because you have to be a dreamer and do unreasonable things, but you also need to be pragmatic. And so I think that middle group of people are people that I think are going to do some very interesting things.
This episode of the Free Cities podcast is brought to you by Veritas Villages. Now, Veritas Villages are freedom-oriented, energy self-sufficient luxury communities designed for people who want to enjoy peace of mind and real freedom in today's unpredictable world. Join a community of like-minded neighbours who value privacy and independence in a place where you can use Bitcoin, including for the purchase of your property. www.veritasvillages.com/free cities for more info, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm impressed to see that you do everything here. You're like a one-man show.
I know. A bit of a bone of contention, has to be said.
Right.
I have a limited budget, but I'm a former and sometimes still filmmaker and director. So I would find it hard not to do it quite well, at least on a budget.
So you do the cameras, you do the...
I do everything. I even use a clapperboard, mate.
Do you do the editing as well?
My beautiful AI agent does the editing now, but hence the clapperboard.
Right.
Clapperboards. We've always used clapperboards in. Do you know what they're for?
Is it like the beginning end of a clip?
It is, but it does do that. It does tell you which scene you're looking at, but it also helps you sync everything up. You create a very sharp noise. Mm-hmm. Basically, this podcast setup is 2 cameras and 2 mics. Mm-hmm. So when I make that crack twice, it gets recorded on all these devices. And then when you import all this data into a bit of software for editing it, as long as you line up those cracking sounds, you're synced together. And AI is surprisingly bad at doing that. I don't know why. You know, you can normally automatically just say sync, but inevitably you still end up having to do it by hand often. But having a clapperboard makes that very, very easy. But yeah, the actual editing is done by an AI now. So I feed it these 2 feeds, so me and you, and the 2 different audio feeds, and I tell it which one's you. So I say when you're speaking, then the AI cuts to you. So
wow, that's amazing.
And then like you watched the one with Patrick. Did you watch it or did you listen to it?
I watched it on YouTube.
Right, okay. That was all AI cutting.
Wow, I would have never known.
Exactly, nor would I. It's really good at cutting, actually.
And the reels that you do, the small short
they're
reels?
all AI as well.
Wow.
But once again, they're AI, but they take a lot of human input. What the AI gives me, basically, and this is kind of how a lot of people use AI anyway, is it gives you a starting point. So I ingest, what was that? I heard, that's my, is that my phone? Yeah. Let me just put it on silent. When basically with the, I ingest so when the first AI has edited all this, then I ingest it into another AI, which listens to it and pulls out what it thinks are important clips. Then I create a template for it, an AI template, and it creates reels. But they're often not, the production value is not high enough for me. So then I go through them and I pick the ones that I think are relevant. It'll give me sort of 30 or 40, and I might pick 20 of them because a lot of the time they get it wrong. And then I correct the spelling mistakes because it puts titles on it. I make the edits look nicer because it's really bad at editing. It edits by the words, but when you listen to it, there might be a bit of a word cut off or whatever. And then then that gets ingested into a bit of software which sends it out to social media networks all at the same time, timed. So
wow,
I know. So basically,
so you are a one-man show.
I'm a one-man show at the moment, but I don't want to be a one-man show. I've been a filmmaker for years and worked in large crews. And they're too big, for sure, for now. You know, you can make a great film with just two of you, really. But really, it's a function of how much income you're generating. I mean, I generate income from this, which is profits, but it's not enough to pay someone else to edit. So I do that as a labour of love, and I don't really pay myself. Really, you know, I kind of subsidise that side of it as well, which is actually changing. I've brought on a sponsor recently, and I'm now getting some new sponsors as well. So the idea is to make it a fully functioning business.
I think you could. I mean, when I was watching that one episode, what came to my head was you could really turn this into a media business with all kinds of stuff, not just the podcast, but you know, a whole media franchise in that sense. Alternative news.
I intend to. I'm not sure. Well, look, I'm 54, right? I don't want to run a company. Okay. How old are you?
I'm 45.
All right. You look a lot younger than 45. But you might have a bit more get up and go. I wouldn't say I love doing this, and I am obsessed with talking about all this stuff: free cities, privacy, cryptocurrency, whatever. This is my life. But the thought of running a business and having to deal with employees and stuff doesn't excite me in the slightest. Or, in fact, I mean, what I love about the way my life works at the moment is when I get home in a few days, I can just take the rest of the week off. If I want, there's no thing, you know. As long as I've got on top of all the things I need to do, which I always do. I always think it. I've always lived a very, very free life, and even before I did this, when I was a filmmaker, I I did about 3 months a year, and the rest of it was with my kids and you know, things ticking over. But the actual nuts and bolts of work was probably 3 months out of the year. And that only changed because I gave up my whole life once I got involved in this. And I don't know, this is, I think, your first foray into all this a little bit, is it?
Yeah, Free Cities, I only heard about it recently when Peter reached out to me, and it looked really awesome. Right. So it's my first time coming in contact with this community, though I would say I've been involved in... I would say, I don't know if you can call this an industry.
Yes, it is an industry.
I think it's a new industry. In fact, I think this is probably one of the more exciting industries that's sort of bubbling up.
Yes, 100%.
And it has different shapes and forms around the world. But I've been sort of building in the space for a while, I would say for the last 8 years or so.
Yeah. So, well, I came in via the Bitcoin route. I was a Bitcoiner. And that was what flipped my whole life upside down, discovering Bitcoin back in the day and then realizing that was more important than my former life. And through Bitcoin, I met Peter. Peter's a Bitcoiner, and we know a guy called Safedina Moose, who's a very famous. He wrote the best. Oh, yeah. Oh, you know Safe, right?
Yeah. Right. I've read all his books.
Okay, right. Well, he put us together, and then I was quite skeptical, I'll be honest, of the Free Cities movement in the beginning, mainly because I didn't really understand what it was. And actually also thought it was quite boring compared to, you know, like that side of it, cities and all this kind of stuff. But what I've realized is, because Bitcoin is now so ubiquitous, it doesn't mean anything to necessarily be a Bitcoiner, if you see what I mean. It's just like, are you a money person, or are you a saver, or
it's gone mainstream?
Exactly right. And then I realized that actually governance and living together is the next most important thing to sort of solve, if you see what I mean. And Bitcoin's definitely a part of it, and so are lots of other things, privacy and the tech stack and all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, I can't make films anymore in the way I used to. You know what I mean? What's the point? I used to make films all around the world, like kind of. Funnily enough, here's something that you're going to be surprised at, because I caught the beginning of your talk. I had to leave.
Oh, at the conference yesterday.
You're from Nagaland.
I am.
Dude, I've spent a long time in Nagaland.
No way.
Exactly.
That's not possible.
It is possible. I went to Nagaland. I was trying to think when it was. I think it was about 20 years ago. I travelled all around the frontier states. Oh, I've been to all of them. I basically went there originally because I'd heard about this story. I was I was a journalist and filmmaker, and I'd heard about this story in Meghalaya, which was someone told me. I was in Bhutan on a job, and I met this guy. This was before it was really before the internet, in fact. That had really kicked off. So it was around about 2000, early 2000, I think it was. And I heard about this story in Meghalaya, so I went there. And then I learned about, all the other states, Mizoram, Tripura, Manipur, all these places. And I was like, fucking hell, this place is amazing. And it was off limits to foreigners.
That's right. 20 years ago, you couldn't really go there.
Of course, it's India.
I guess as a journalist, you probably...
No, not as a journalist. It's India, mate.
Right.
You just meet... Well, what I did was I spent 6 months travelling around the northeast frontier states. And Nagaland was the most amazing because it was the one that everyone said, oh, you can't go there, and there's headhunters there.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous. And it kind of was dangerous, but I'd already been to some war zones as a journalist, right? So I knew that actually, in a place like that, you're safer than a local person, really, because you're nothing to do with what's going on. So I snuck into a few of the states, and in other ones, I managed to get a fake permit for Nagaland, because it was all back in the day where you just stamped
just
things.
A piece of paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But friends of mine who were coming in the back of trucks and stuff to go around. But once you were in those places, they couldn't really catch up with you. It was, unless you hit a roadblock, and Nagaland did have some roadblocks, but only when something happened. Like we were where we were hanging. I went all around where all the cognac people are, because they were they were the famous headhunters. And
that's right.
But there was still warring, basically, not with the Indian government, but between each other. And not that long ago, before I was there, a head appeared on a stake, in the middle of a village somewhere, and all this kind of stuff. And then the police would go in and shut it down. And it's an amazing place. I still own quite a number of Naga shawls that
the red and blue ones.
Right. Well, the ones that I really like, they're like Angami. Do you know what tribe?
So I am Angami.
Oh, right.
So my mother is an Angami tribe.
Right. Well, I've got an old Angami shawl that someone gave me.
Those are beautiful.
It is. It's a black one.
That's right.
Right. And it's a famous design. I know that because it's popped up a few times in my life, and I've still got it. That's so mad that you're Angami.
It's really, really mad.
Have you spent any time there?
Not really. I mean, I was born there. So my mother is Angami, and my father is from Rajasthan. So completely different, part of India. And I was there until I was 6 or 7, until I left. So I've been back there since. In fact, I was there a few years ago, and I do want to go back again. But I didn't spend my adult life there. But it is a very interesting place. And it's unfortunate that it has a lot of potential, because it's unique, it's different, but it's also a very poor place. And that makes it hard for the culture to really expand and catch the imagination of sort of mainstream people.
Well, the thing about all of those states, just so people are listening here, if you think of India as a sort of an inverted triangle, on the northeast corner, including the Himalayas, is it Arunachal?
Right, that's the Chinese border.
Yes. What's it called?
Arunachal Pradesh.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And underneath it, there's Assam, with Mizoram, Meghalaya, Tripura, Manipur, and Nagaland. And they're basically you as an ethnic group, you are basically Southeast Asian. You're not of the Indian continent, but it became incorporated. Burma is very similar.
They're Burmese, so yeah. I would say the Naga people, of all including all the tribes, whether it's Angami or Konyak, I would say they're more of the Burmese stock, but the north of Burma, and in fact, if you go to Myanmar today and you go to the north, it's all tribes. In fact, the Naga tribes are in the north of Burma.
Yes.
And that group are the tribes that still there's still conflict in Myanmar, internal conflict, because the tribes still see themselves as independent people.
Yeah. Well, and the same goes for the Nagas in India, who are separatists, really, because it shouldn't really be part of India. You don't have a huge amount in common culturally with India as a whole. I mean, India is a vast place anyway, but also there is warring amongst. But on the whole, I mean, I would say it was one of the pivotal moments in my life, and it even physically it was, but spiritually, I loved hanging out there. Like I spent like 1.5 months on a refugee camp in Mizoram. Have you ever heard of the Bru tribe?
No.
They were displaced from Mizoram into Tripura, and there was like 20,000 or something of them living in this refugee camp, which was, you can imagine, a refugee camp there ended up just being a city, and it was all made with bamboo and thatch. It was a beautiful looking place, actually. It sounds terrible, but it wasn't. They were just displaced. And I just ended up living with one family, and I just started living there. And just, there were no foreigners anywhere.
Even now, I would say there's really no foreigners. It's become a little bit more integrated just because of technology. Everyone kind of knows what's happening. Yeah. But I would say in terms of foreigners in Nagaland, there's probably still not, I would say there's probably a handful of foreigners who live there.
That's right. But and like I say, it actually did change my life, because so back then I was a filmmaker and a photographer. Then really I was a photographer only. I hadn't started making films. But so I went to Meghalaya, and I made a photo story on these things called living bridges. Do you know what they are?
Oh, that's right. That's the trees sort of create the bridges, right?
Yes, right. They're rubber trees that grow. The Khasi tribe, they are, the Khasi, up in the highlands of Meghalaya. And for years they grow them these trees together, and they create the most incredible bridges and ladders and stuff, like 80 or 90-year-old living bridges. And no one had heard about it. There was no Lonely Planet guide back then. There was no nothing. So and the internet was in its real fledgling days. Like I had a website in 1998, which I designed and built myself. You can still see it on the Internet Wayback Machine. It's hilarious. It's like little blocks of, and it was to showcase my photography, but it was terrible. And what I was doing, so when I was traveling, whenever I could get an internet connection, which is hard around there, but I could, I think in the majors. In Shillong, there was an internet cafe that had like dial-up on it or something. And I was just publishing my work to a web page, just literally embedding it in a web page, and then sending the link to my family back home so they could see what I've been up to, because I was just on this mad 2-year, I'm just going to photograph the world on my own sort of like trip. I gave up a job I worked at a newspaper in London. And unbeknown to me, I didn't think this thing through as well, but Google was indexing it. And after about a year of me doing this, it was becoming searchable. And it never occurred to me back then that things like that would transpire. And through that, the BBC contacted me because they were making a documentary about tribal people around the world. And they said, wow, we saw these pictures of these bridges. What the hell's going on? I got an random email, started a dialogue, and ended up working on that film for almost 3 years. It was a Human Planet, it was called. It was like the 8 episodes about all the most crazy indigenous people living in extreme circumstances all around the world. And it completely changed my life. It projected me to this completely different area of the media where I became a sort of a media personality kind of thing. And it was all because of this random guy I met in Bhutan who told me to go to Meghalaya, and then I ended up going around spending 6 months in the Northeast Frontier State. So
wow, that's wild. That's
but
really,
I couldn't
really
believe
wild.
it when you said that. You said like I'm from Nagaland. I'm like, no. And to be an Angami, that's amazing because
I think the Angami tribe, if I remember, is probably the largest tribe in terms of the numbers of people, and probably the more influential tribe. Because the people in power, I think, are from the Angami tribe. But there's a lot of tribes.
Oh, yeah.
And
Chang, Ringma, Chakasang.
That's
Lofa,
right.
Sangtam.
Yeah, Mao.
Tangkhal, Mao. Yeah. There's a lot.
There's a lot. And I don't think the circumstances have changed that much since you were there in terms of internal conflicts between the tribes. That still exists, and I feel maybe that's maybe the main reason why it hasn't. There's no cohesion between the tribes, which is unfortunate because if the tribes came together.
Thing is, though, they've tried that. Like I say, I've covered a lot of indigenous people around the world, and you can't unify tribes. Like Papua New Guinea is another example of this. They've tried all kinds of things. Papua is a very extreme version of the northeast states of India, because they're fully like warring with each other all the time. And so the local government created a festival, the Hornbill Festival, which was to try and bring them all together.
Which has really become a thing now.
Yeah, but that's a nightmare because you end up everyone fighting at these things. It's like put everyone all in one place and it's like the spears come out and it's like, oh God, here we go again. But I don't know. I don't expect people to get on. I don't know why you would expect people to get on. Like, just, I think the answer is probably, I mean, funnily enough, though, when I look at the tribes of northeast India, that and you have the same characteristics. They're very chilled out, actually. Maybe not the Konyaks. The Konyaks were pretty extreme, right? But most Southeast Asians have that calmness and super polite. I mean, I traveled 6 months, right? There was no tourist infrastructure at all. And so I never one night spent a night looking for somewhere to stay. Never. There was always someone who came up to me in the street and said, come and stay at my house. It was that kind of a place. And, that's why I ended up staying there for so long. I was so enamored by the extreme, politeness and just niceness of people. I couldn't believe.
I don't think that's changed. I don't think that's changed. I think that hospitality, I think it's in the culture. What was your take on, because I find it ironic that even though people are, very tribal in nature historically, a lot of them are now Baptists.
Yeah, there's a reason for that, because, and here's some weird things about, I found out a lot of weird things about, especially Meghalaya, where I went first. Like, for example, Meghalaya is the rainiest place in the world. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
There's a place in Meghalaya, which is near to Nagaland. They're all part of the same sort of area, which has something ridiculous like over 2.5 meters of rain. It's the rainiest. It's in the Guinness Book of Records. It's the rainiest place. It also has a matrilineal culture, which is which means the women inherit all the surname, the second name, property, all this kind of stuff, which is really weird. So weird that I ended up making a BBC documentary about the men's rights movement in Meghalaya. There's actually a men's rights movement which was campaigning for equal rights with women. It's such a crazy place, right? Loads of weird and wonderful things like that happen. Sorry, what did you ask me about? I've just got off on a tangent.
I was asking what was your thoughts on the fact that they're all converted to Christianity?
So when I was spending time in Meghalaya, I lived with the Khasi tribe for like about a month in this beautiful place called Molalong, which is now an Indian tourist destination, strangely. But it's where the living bridges are. They were the ones that made these bridges. And they had a Baptist church there. And it turns out that basically Welsh missionaries went there like 100 years prior, as a lot of missionaries did in a lot of places. I think they saw tribal societies as an easy option because you're polite and you had you were easy to convince that this religion might be better than your indigenous religion. And you see it all around the world. Everywhere you go, this was a very common thing to do. But it was just pure luck that the kind of the geography got divided up between, right, so if the Baptists are going there, then they're not going there. So we'll have this part of India, you have that part, you have that part. Because they knew, the Khasi knew more about Welsh history than I did, and I was living in Wales, because this pastor who had set up the church in Molinong had been like, telling them all about famous Welsh people from history and stuff like this. But yeah, it's I don't know why everyone took it up. I suppose people who have an indigenous religion probably saw Christianity as a new and interesting and innovative thing. And especially because, like it, wrong or right, doesn't really matter. People were enamored by outsiders coming in because they brought with them things that local people didn't have. I think now it was obviously doesn't make any difference. They've got the internet now. They can see just how screwed up the outside world is.
Yeah.
I think back in the day there was much more of a rosy kind of sheen put on incomers. I mean, I had that experience myself. I was treated so well. Like wherever I was basically a sort of 20-something hippie. I had dreadlocks, long hair, and if I walked into a village, I'd be like straight over to the guy in charge, sit down, have a drink with them, and it's like you get inserted into society at that level. I had no place. I had no reason to be at that level.
I still can't comprehend that you were there 20 years ago. It blows my mind. I've actually never met someone who's
Well, I've not met many people who've ever been there either.
Well, you probably never met anyone who's from there that kind of lives my lifestyle.
Enough, since Facebook's big over there, right?
That's right.
Facebook's kind of like the internet.
It is the internet.
I still get messages from people. Mr. Tim, we still remember you, we still this, we still that. Because, like, without realising it, I had an effect on that place, especially Molinong. And Molinong was the place in Meghalaya where there was this one very famous bridge, which the BBC ended up making a film out of. That was the rest of my story. So the BBC contacted me and about the bridges, and they ended up sending a massive film crew out there. And then it put it on the map. And the only thing that happened that I was surprised about, because when I went back to do the story on the men's rights movement, last time I was there, it was this sleepy little village, Molinong. It was amazing. It was like an oasis. And I went back and I imagined, there's going to be some tourism here now. What I didn't realise was it was Indian tourism. And I was expecting to see foreign tourists, and then the penny dropped, and I thought, oh my God, wait a minute, India's changing. India, and then you realise the middle class in India had risen in that short amount of time. It was probably only about 7 or 8 years. Had exploded. Yeah.
Well, it's really exploded now because I was at the Hornbill Festival.
Oh, sorry, Hornbill, that's a Nagaland one?
Yes, right.
Wait a minute, did I say that was in? Did I just say that there was a Hornbill Festival in Papua New Guinea?
No.
What was that one called then?
You're right. Okay. You're talking about Hornbill Festival in either Meghalaya or
there's
Nagaland.
one in Nagaland. No, the one I was talking about in
in Papua New Guinea. Okay.
There is the same thing there. I think I got them mixed up. Anyway, whatever.
Right.
Hornbill, you're right. Is a coming together of the tribes in Nagaland.
It's become. So I was there a few years ago, and it was very interesting to see Indian tourists who would go for the festival, but these were not like Indian family tourists. These were young, adventurous bloggers, young, adventurous backpacker types, all Indians, both men and women. In fact, you see a lot of adventurous women travelers. And generally, these people are educated, they probably studied abroad, and they're very interested in the fact that in India, there is such a culture. So I think it's a great thing. Just coming back to what you were saying earlier in terms of the women having rights and women having a lot more control, that's really, really fascinating. I'm glad you brought it up because I think this is still the case in Nagaland today. The women, when I see my family structure, so it's like my aunts, and they run the families. Like my aunt or aunts, they run the household. They're the breadwinners. They're the ones calling the shots. And the men are out just kind of like working in the fields.
Yeah, in Meghalaya, the youngest daughter, I think they call her the Karkuda or something, she inherits everything and when you marry, you take on the woman's name. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. There's only a few it's not matriarchal, it's matrilineal, but I think there's almost no matriarchal, like as in patriarchal, matriarchal societies in the world, and there's only a few matrilineal ones. I think there's some in South America, up in the Andes, or somewhere like that. Okay.
Well, and I guess some historians do say that for most of human history, it's been very much a matriarchal society. You know, like Mother Goddess and animism. The women were they were in charge of their bodies for most of human history. I think it's only been a few thousand years that's changed.
Maybe that's why, going back to what you said about the religion coming into the area, because like I would say Christian and religion is very much patriarchal. And like you say, indigenous religion is often, you could say, matriarchal, because it is about the earth and it's about honouring the earth. Mind you, saying that though, you know, I dip my toes into a few of the religions up there, and it's not as it's very easy to go, wow, it just must be amazing being at one with nature, and it's nothing like that at all. They want to cut down a load of trees to build a garden, they'll just do it, and they'll burn it as well, and you know, like it's not as, I think people idolize it, things like that over here.
For sure. And especially in Nagaland, the last time I was there, I did notice that there's now a concerted effort to keep the environment intact. So there's areas where you can't cut down trees, but a lot of the nature has actually been destroyed, and it's been destroyed just, you know, from economic reasons, timber, and you see even nature, like all the birds and animals have sort of disappeared because there's no concerted effort to say, hey, we're going to maintain the rainforest, because, you know, in that part of the world there's rainforests.
Yeah, it's lovely.
And a lot of the rainforests are no more.
I trekked all over there. Yeah, it's amazing. After we finish speaking, I have got probably 20,000 photos from there, and
I'd love
quite
to
a
see
few
them.
of them are online, and there is almost certainly pictures of Angami people, I'm sure, because I just went from place to place, and in the end I got into the shawls. If anyone doesn't know about
the shawls, are amazing.
Right.
They're all handmade.
Yes. And so it became this thing. And once I got into the shawls, I actually ended up just going to tribes to see their shawls because they're just incredible. And I still have a huge collection of them. Like I say, I was given this Angami one, and it's what started it all off. And I get, you know, it's just weird to meet someone from there. Anyway, but so how did you get from Nagaland to California then? Is that because I know actually there are many more opportunities now, aren't there, for youngsters from places like that to end up getting to America. I've run into, like, so I go to Mongolia quite a lot. You see Mongolians from random places coming to university, not from wealthy families necessarily or anything like that. It's just the government do a scheme, get you here, do that. Is it? How did you end up in California?
So my path was very different from, I would say, the traditional path of someone born there would take. So my path was different, though. I think what I've noticed is that, yes, probably today there's probably a community of Nagas in the U.S., and predominantly they probably have moved there through the church. There's probably a few churches that, because, you know, it's a Christian Baptist religion, so I think through the churches there's probably been some migration. And I'm on these emails. I think I joined them a long time ago. There's a Naga Foundation, and they do scholarships and stuff like that. So probably through those channels, though I think it's still very rare. And so my path was different because even though I was born in Nagaland, my father was not from Nagaland. He's from Rajasthan, mainstream India, and he worked for the government.
He was a journalist?
No. He was a government official.
I thought you said mainstream media.
No. He was like mainstream India.
Oh, okay.
Right, like he was from the mainstream Indian
And he
culture.
was posted to Nagaland.
He was posted. He actually chose to go there because, probably like you, he was very adventurous. At 20, he converted to communism, and he wanted to he was one of those like very interesting characters, and a free thinker, wanted to do things by himself. And so he chose to go to the most dangerous and new places in India. And so he chose to go there. Nobody wanted to go there.
Yeah. I did, sorry to butt in, I did hang out with a lot of the army out there as well. They were, because once or twice there was nowhere to stay, because we were just going, we were going off walking. We walked into Burma. There's no like borders there or anything.
Right.
I've been into Myanmar a few times illegally. I don't know whether I should say this, but from that side, from the Thai side, like everything was negotiable back there.
I think it's still the case now. It's such a vast piece of forest.
Yes.
That it's very hard to sort of have borders and do that. But yeah, so my father was just a very interesting man, and just very adventurous. So when he got there, he did realize that if he wanted to make any sort of change, he would have to be accepted into the culture. Because, when he moved there, this is like probably in the 60s.
Wow.
So you can imagine, the state of affairs there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have walked around the Cognac territory at that particular time.
I think at that time it was still very tribal.
Yeah.
And
but like very warring.
Yes.
Headhunting.
That's right.
Right. Oh my God. That I hate to say, but that is what attracted me there.
Yeah. I look at some photos of when my dad had moved there. He was tribal outfits. And so he very soon realized that he needed to get accepted into the culture. And so he married the daughter of the chief. And so then he became one of them through the marriage, and got accepted into the tribe. And so hence he was able to then affect change and build trust. But he was not, he was a vegetarian. And as
bad idea.
Bad idea in Nagaland. It's very difficult. They take meat eating to the next level.
Of course, Rajasthan, but Rajasthanis aren't traditionally vegetarians.
I think Rajasthanis are
they?
Generally vegetarians. Okay. But, he was a Hindu.
Sure, yeah.
Didn't eat meat. And the culture that he got accepted into, heavy.
He must have eaten meat, though, especially at their wedding. Jesus.
Yeah, maybe.
There's no way he didn't eat a piece of meat at their wedding.
Yeah. I can't imagine them having a vegetarian restaurant or something like that.
They probably do in Shillong now because it's. But anyway, yeah. Come on, carry on. No, keep butting in.
Though, the food is actually very interesting there. When I was there last, the types of rice that grow there, all the different black rice, brown rice, wild rice, it just grows there. It's fascinating. And I think the quality of the produce is actually very high quality of produce, stuff that grows there up in the altitude. It kind of reminds me of a little bit of like Peru. When you go to the Sacred Valley and the corn that comes from there.
Well, the British set up a lot of tea plantations around there as well, like Shillong. Very nice environment. Shillong's, like weather is just perfect. It's like a lot of like Darjeeling. It's the same kind of, it's the same altitude. Honestly, the northeast frontier states are so fascinating. Geographically, everything. Like the fact that Meghalaya is the rainiest place in the world. And that's the reason why Bangladesh is always so flooded, because
it all goes down through
and the weather hits the Himalayas up in the north, can't get past, rains, comes down, Meghalaya into Bangladesh. You can understand so much about just everything by looking there. I went to River Island. There's the biggest river island in the world there as well, in Assam, along the big river.
That's
there.
right.
It's the Brahmaputra, right?
It's the Brahmaputra,
yeah. And it goes, and you can follow that all the way up into the Himalayas as well.
That's
it's just so diverse.
Well, that region is becoming a lot more geopolitically strategic in the sense that, the One Belt, One Road initiative. Plus, India is trying to connect the roads down to Thailand or down to to Malaysia.
Well, also China claim Arunachal Pradesh.
That's right. That's a contentious area.
The only place we never got to, where we tried to get up to the border there, when you go straight to hit the Chinese border, and the army kept saying, you can't come, because there's proper skirmishes there all the time.
Yeah.
But there's a tribe that I really wanted to visit up there, that they do. Oh, that's it. They put the things in their noses, like it's insane. These big plates. Well, I can't remember what they're called. But that was the only place that I wanted to go that I couldn't get. Anyway, I keep butting in. Sorry, I love the place. You can tell. Like I could talk about that area for so long. So you got to.
Did you? Yeah. So my path was not the typical path because of my father's, I guess, networks and connections, and his ability to, and him being an outsider, he sent us off. He didn't want us to, like me and my siblings, he didn't want us to grow up in Nagaland because it was dangerous. I mean, for him, it was a very dangerous situation because he was one of the first outsiders coming in and essentially now dictating how things should be done.
And the Indians weren't very well.
They hated them.
Yeah.
And so even though he was embraced by the culture and he married into the culture, that was not sufficient. So it was a very dangerous place for the children.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you look any Indian? I can't really make it out. You definitely look more Asian than Indian, but did you, according to your friends back in Nagaland, would they obviously recognize that your dad was from Rajasthan?
Probably. I mean, I think they see me as mixed. And so if you look at my siblings, my two brothers and my sister are very much, they look Naga. Like if they just look 100% Naga. Me, I look maybe a bit mixed because I actually have a beard, which Nagas don't have facial hair.
That's right.
And so
really bad beards out there, right? It's true, isn't it?
It's true.
I remember that.
So the facial hair is probably sets me a little bit, but I think I would probably be embraced as a Naga just because my mother is Angami and the tribe is well known. But yeah, so my dad sent us off to an international boarding school and didn't want us to be raised in that environment. So we left very, very early on.
Wow. And you said we'll get onto some Free Cities content in a minute, but so you reckon there's a Naga community in California? Is that right?
I think I don't think it's California. I think it's somewhere in either Texas.
Oh, right.
Or
and it's a church. That would be a church.
I think it's some pastors. I think Naga pastors sort of immigrated to the U.S. and then sort of set up this community.
You asked me about my opinion on Christianity. What's yours?
Right.
What's yours?
Well, it's probably similar to yours. I mean, historically, you look at around the world, the tribes have always been very easy to convert to Christianity, whether it's in South America or anywhere else in the world. And I think you're right. Like, I think they're a lot more accepting.
It's interesting though because it does depend on the temperament of the tribe, and Asian tribes, as in Southeast Asians, are so soft and welcoming. It's too easy because a lot of tribes do reject, and I'd say the Konyaks are a bit more like that. Mind you, the Konyaks, they're also religious as well because I went to church there. Like when you go and live there, you have to do all that stuff. You have to go to church and stuff. But there are lots of cases around the world of missionaries being told to F off, basically. But it's just in Southeast Asia, you can just see why that doesn't happen because you're such a welcoming group of people. You're obviously going to welcome this thing in and then it's going to, have its effect.
Well, there's probably much deeper reasons, which I honestly, I don't really know. But I wonder, why is it that there's got to be some other reasons. And I think there might be simpler reasons, such as maybe they do need a bit of structure. You know, when you're very tribal and there's a lot of infighting, maybe coming under one umbrella it creates a bit of structure, which maybe creates a bit of stability. Maybe there's an element of that. Maybe there's an element of a community cohesion that maybe the church brings, that might be seen as a positive thing. Maybe it could be the songs. Maybe it could be, it could be the singing, and who knows? There could be some very simpler elements.
Thing is, though, my impression of those missionaries 100 years ago, they were very fire and brimstone, weren't they? They wouldn't. It wouldn't cut it now in a lot of places to go in there and like if you don't do what, you'll go to hell and all this kind of stuff, But that was definitely the modus operandi in a lot of places. You see it in Africa as well. That whole kind of you'll be damned if you don't do this.
That's true, and I think that's probably what's happened in a lot of parts of the world through the Inquisitions and all of that. But I think in Nagaland, I think it was probably the other way around. I think the missionaries who went there were very loving and giving and caring. And I think that's probably why they got accepted in, because they were providing love. I don't think it was coercion, at least from what I've seen in Nagaland. South America, I think probably a different story. But I think in Nagaland, say 100 years ago, 150 years ago, that's sort of when the missionaries started going there. I think they brought a lot of love and care and an outsider's perspective.
Imagine going in there 150 years ago. Jesus,
I would have loved to.
Yeah, you would. I would have been petrified. I mean, it's like when I was there, you could get trucks around and you could move around and that. But imagine walking everywhere, and I mean, you've got to negotiate boundaries everywhere you go. You can't just walk anywhere and go on to this place, and where are you going to find your fixes? Where are you going to find the people to help you? Because you can't take this guy into that place. You've got to find someone he knows to then, and walking everywhere even. I'm fascinated by places where you have to walk everywhere. I love places without roads. There's very few places like that now. But 20 years ago, there were way more, especially up in the Himalayas and around those places. In Bhutan, the same. Sometimes in Bhutan, we walked 10 or 12 days to go to places, And that is what used to drive me to all those places, because as soon as a road comes, everything changes very, very quickly. Within 2 or 3 years, structures change, and that, I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I think it's not at all. I think I had a very privileged eye to be able to come from my extreme luxurious life to then go and sort of poke my sort of nose into a different world. But
the roads, I think you're right. It's the roads. That's the first thing that comes in. Well, maybe the first thing is the television and then the roads. But, in Nagaland, the roads are still, there's main roads that sort of connect the highways, but most of Nagaland is still, it's a walking culture. There's a lot of villages all around. I would say most of Nagaland probably doesn't have highways. And it's dirt roads or really bad shaped roads.
Well, it's a frontier, isn't it? It's the edge of India. And the only reason, this is my experience, because I traveled all around India for like a couple of years. The only reason that they maintain roads is for military reasons on the borders. And that border, the border with Nagaland and Myanmar, I mean, it's the edge of Myanmar as well. It's kind of like the same in Myanmar. There's nothing there except forest on that edge. And then on the Nagaland edge, there's nothing, which is why you can walk to Myanmar very easily. Then, in fact, a lot of the tribes live in both countries, don't they?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Well, I think the tribes, like let's say the Angami tribes, I think they were really part of the Burmese diaspora or the Burmese geographical structure for a very long time, and they kind of were left to their own devices for a very long time. It was such a remote part of the world. They were just sort of left to their own setup, and it reminds me of the tribal governance system. It's actually very interesting because the tribes sort of manage themselves. And it's almost sort of like the Greek systems back in the day, where each sort of group kind of manages themselves. And in a way, it's still kind of like that. And in a way, it kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually does. I think I went to a lot of meetings and a lot of circles of people discussing stuff. And there's obviously a great importance put on resolving issues. You know, it's the same, you see the same thing in tribal societies all around the world. Maintaining the tribe is really important. And the smaller it is, the more important it is to bring things out, you know, to have things out via normally an adjudicator. And in tribal structure, it's often, you know, there's a hierarchy of people that you can turn to sort of have your thing resolved and stuff. But I agree. I agree. You could look at it easily as a decentralized system of governance, right? If you took the whole of that area, and people say, yeah, but they're warring and this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, but what's worse? Like take the state of the world. If the world devolved into lots of tiny city states, and you know, there'd be a lot of fighting because there's more of them. But I would say that's better than Russia and America fighting. Like if you get small conflicts, but in the centralized version, when you get two massive conflicts, you get complete annihilation. So actually, probably the decentralized one, on paper at least, is the better, more preferable way of working. I don't know. It's a theory. Obviously, it fits in with the theory of like free cities and city states and this kind of stuff as well.
That's right. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it is a theory, and there's a lot of truth to it. Though on the other side, and this is probably the story of China, because China was this small kingdoms, and what propelled China to become a modern, wealthier nation was the fact that someone brutally was able to put it under one centralized leadership. And without that, there's no way China would have risen, at least from a modern perspective and an economic perspective. So I guess there's truths to both. But what I see interesting about the free cities concept is maybe the direction is you centralize and become wealthy, and then you decentralize.
I've just written that down. That came to me as you were speaking. It's a function of the timeline you're on.
That's right.
I think you're right. Once your standard of living reaches a certain point, decentralization makes more sense than trying it right from the word go.
Yeah. And you can see the contrast between, say, China and India. Because in a way, India is still, in a way, a decentralized system because they're a federalist system. And so there's all these different states, and they have their own cabinets, and they have their own governance, and you know, all the states have to vote on stuff. So it is, in a way, similar to an American system, a federalist system, which is a decentralized system, even though there's a central authority. And you know, it's very hard to get stuff done in that sort of system,
unless you pay someone off.
Right. I mean that causes corruption. Though I mean things are changing. Though China was able to propel because they were able to bring it under one centralized system. Will that change down the road? Do they become more authoritarian, or do then once they reach a certain, economic level, do they then decide to all sort of decentralize? It's possible.
The other thing to obviously mention about China is when China began the Great Change, they used special economic zones to do that. They couldn't roll out a free market version of capitalism or sort of a more free market way of doing things. They couldn't roll it out nationwide, so they started for special economic zones, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, I can't remember what they're all called, and they are now some of the most powerful cities where they got to try out the free market ideas before they rolled them out into the rest of the country. And that can't be underestimated because that's the history of special economic zones. There was one of the pivotal moments in the history of special economic zones, which we're now in the we're now at the iteration of sovereign special economic zones, which are more like sovereign entities.
That's right.
Like countries. And that's kind of where we're at now.
That's right. And I think contrary to maybe mainstream view, China is a very, very competitive place in terms of the different cities competing with each other for the next hub of electric vehicles or whatnot. And if you're a mayor of a certain province, I mean, the way you rise up the ranks is to make sure your geography exceeds and flourishes. And so the competition, in a way, it is in a way sort of decentralized in that sense, because all the different mayors have to then compete with each other to make the provinces much more better than the guy next to them.
It's true. I don't know enough about China. Last time I went to China was a long time ago, even around that same time I was in Nagaland. Actually, maybe a bit later than that. But you do hear a lot of negative stuff about China, and rightly so in a way, because it's very centralized. And I think they are basically what they're trialing in the form of governance there, this sort of social credit systems and all this kind of stuff, is super dystopian for the Western eye. But yet we see it happening here as well. I don't really know, but I agree with you. You shouldn't. It's not all bad, but I really don't know what the solution is, because I don't believe at all in the social credit system. I think that is dystopian. But I don't know how you stop it happening, because it's a function of technology, and it makes total sense. If I was running a country, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think anyone really knows how it's going to play out, because it's never been done in history in that size, in that big scope of 1.5 billion people. It's never been done. So I don't think anyone really knows, because there's no precedence in that size. But what's interesting? What you were saying, that the rise of China, in a way, was propelled because they set up a few special economic zones, and they were like the test beds, yes, which sort of created the know-how to sort of expand that across the country. Another, I think I recently was listening to a German economist who lived in Japan and had written a book that was a bestseller in Japan. I forget the name. But he was saying the other reason China really sort of took off during that time was because Deng Xiaoping had gone to Japan, and he had asked them, "What's your secret to like all of the stuff?" And I think in Japan there is the truth, and then there's the truth. Mm-hmm. And in public you speak the truth, but behind closed doors you speak the real truth. And behind closed doors, they basically said it's the banks. Because they asked him, how many banks do you have? And he said, we have one bank. And the Japanese were like, how are you going to get credit to all of these people through one bank? And in Japan at the time, they had all of these banks to distribute credit to all the businesses. And that's when he went back and he set up hundreds and hundreds of cooperative banks, and that really unleashed the credit system. And that was probably, at least, according to this theory, it was probably one of the more important factors of sort of the rise of China, which I think is fascinating.
Well, I mean, imagine the undertaking of going from a communist system to a free market system. They didn't even have ownership. There's no market. There's no market for ownership, property, anything. You can't roll that out. You can't just collapse a country of that many people and say, right, suddenly you can now buy houses, you can buy bits of land and stuff. Who knows? I think the SEZs were Shenzhen is a global powerhouse. Hong Kong, is it had to happen that way. What's so great about that is you can see the same thing now happening with people. So it's like You can't roll out. I mean, Dubai might be a good example, though, because Dubai started its zones a while ago. And now when you go to Dubai, you feel like the whole place is just embodying these ideas, this free, and Dubai will probably, I don't know whether, I mean, that's debatable whether they will actually innovate further in the zone, but certainly you can try out new governance systems now. It's not so much the economics side. It's more like, well, why don't we govern in a bit more of a freer way and see if that works, and then that bleeds out into the world. I mean, that's the theory that we're all behind,
And I think it's a good theory, though I would say, being in the conference last few days, one thing I did notice is I think a lot of the free cities movements and people experimenting, a lot of it is being done in the West, and the conversation is really coming from a sort of Western perspective. Though I think a lot of this stuff is also happening in Asia. Yeah. And if you look at the special economic zones that are popping up in Asia, it's incredible. So one of the reasons why I moved to Singapore and live there now is I wanted to see what's happening in Asia by living there and not from, the Wall Street Journal in California. And now that I live in Singapore and I see it from that perspective, there's like across the bridge in Malaysia, there's a lot of very interesting special economic zones that are popping up. And in Malaysia, for instance, the political system is that there's a central government, but there's also kings. There's a sultans sort of in all over Malaysia. So Malacca has its own sovereignty. Johor has its own sovereignty. Penang, which is sort of more Chinese leadership, has its own sovereignty. And I suppose they're in a way states, but there's rulers. There's a sultan. And that system is, I think, very interesting for the free city sort of concept to look at, because they're in a way doing it, and that they don't call it that, but I think it is. And so that's just Malaysia. But then Indonesia, there's some very interesting stuff happening in Indonesia. Vietnam is trying a lot of special economic zones. In fact, one of my favorite cities in Vietnam is Da Nang, and Da Nang is a newer city that's very modern, and it's a planned city. So if you go to Hanoi or you go to Saigon,
crazy.
It's crazy, right? Because the infrastructure they're building on top of each other. But in Da Nang, it was an empty place, and then they planned the city. So the roads are great, the sidewalks are amazing, and that city is flourishing because it's a sort of a new city. And so I think Vietnam is trying a lot of these things, and those places do make a lot of difference because they change the needle. They move the needle from a macro perspective, and
I think you're absolutely right. And I would say that the reason that it's skewed towards the Western eye is because the movement in its current form has come out of Europe.
Right.
But 100%, like hotspots of the world, Central America is definitely a hotspot, but also Asia, Southeast Asia, there's a big project going through a feasibility study in Brunei at the moment, which is exactly what you're talking about. Sultan wanting to do something, sovereigns get to think much longer term than your average democratic system. And I mean, one of the conclusions that free cities people come to in the end is, how do you work with the host government, and the longer term the government can think, the better. Now, the democratic governments, often you run into super problems immediately, and Prospero's experiencing that now. One government loves the SEZs, gives them the go-ahead. The next one comes in, it's far left socialist, and they're like, stop stealing our land, and then close it down.
Right.
But the reason Dubai is so successful, it's sovereigns saying, right, here's a 100-year plan for this place. And there's no voting people in and out. And as long as you've got a good king, obviously the downside is if you get a bad king or a bad queen, they can screw a whole country up. But on the whole, a lot of people don't like the sovereign model. But if you just look at it on paper, it has massive benefits to creating great countries. I mean, we're all here trying to work out what the best version is.
What's that libertarian book? I think it's called The End of Democracy or The Death of Democracy. It's
not Hopper.
I think it's Hopper.
Democracy, the
god that died,
the god that failed.
Right. I mean, I think the central premise of that book is that that sovereigns are a better way of managing than democracies because they can think much. It's a fascinating book,
dude. If you go into that, if you go into that whole, it's the ultimate red pill. Is democracy doesn't work. Because at the moment, the democratic system is just untouchable. I mean, you've got nations fighting for democracy. Let's bring democracy to, Iraq. Let's bring, and it's like, but there is a growing interest in the notion that this is a terrible system because it forces short-term thinking and it incentivizes politicians to think in the wrong way because it's like a job. And you're looking 4 years ahead. And when you leave these days, and I mean, when you take democracy to extremes and places like, you look at places like Mexico, where when there's a regime change in Mexico, people are getting killed. Mm-hmm. The people who are leaving are just slaughtered sometimes, and the new lot just change all the rules. And Honduras, the same thing happened. It went from right to left. And during the right regime, they changed the constitution to allow for ZAs. This was voted on. ZAs are the free zones in Honduras. The other side got in and said no, and changed it back unconstitutionally. So now nothing means anything. So what happens now? Like then that was the democratic system again. There was nothing to keep it in check. And whatever you plan can be overturned in 4 years if things don't go well. And I don't know. Me personally, I don't really know what the answer is. I love the private city model because I think that has the best incentive model. That's like you run a small city as a business. And you have a contract. So if I'm the city provider, I have a contract with you. These are my responsibilities. These are your responsibilities. Yeah. And then we stick to it. Yeah. And we have an outside arbitration outside of that. That seems fair, good, and nothing's perfect. But at least we've got a contract. And people will say, yeah, but contracts get broken. And it's like, well, the Honduras are doing pretty well with their contract at the moment. They had a contract, they had an international agreement, they had an agreement with the government not to shut them down. And then they're suing the government and the government are backing down now. So that's kind of working.
So in Honduras, is the ZAs, is that incorporated into the constitution?
Yeah. That's how they got the permission to do it. The vote was to change the constitution to allow these places because prior to that, they were kind of unconstitutional because they have a degree of regulatory sovereignty. They don't have legal sovereignty on, like murder, this kind of, they have regulatory autonomy, but that's a big deal. And
that is a big deal.
Yeah.
That is a big deal.
But so do SEZs often. That's the thing. The difference with Honduras, with Prosper is that you can live there and you can get all the benefits. It's normally just businesses,
Yeah, but I do agree about the private cities. Ironically, I think yesterday there was a lady that did a presentation, and she was mentioning Irvine, California, as the largest private city in the world, and the most successful private city in the world because of the size. I used to live in Irvine. I had no idea.
Really?
And I lived there for 2 years, and Irvine was, well, it's not a place for me because it's very suburban, big roads, fences, and big homes. So it wasn't a place that I particularly liked because I was young, but I think it is the safest city in America, and privately built by the Irvine family, and a huge success. And I think more of those will not definitely pop up. But are you familiar with the work that John McKinney is doing?
No,
So he's in this conference, and he's working with a tribal.
Oh yeah. I caught a bit of that. Sorry, yeah. Indigenous people in the States.
That's right.
Yeah.
The native Indian tribes have, sovereignty of their own land, and I think every state has, some differences, but he's trying to do SEZs with them. And I think that's a very interesting idea.
Well, basically, if you adhere to these kind of ideas that we're talking about, you have to look for opportunities. And opportunities arise where there are already semi-sovereign places who want to improve themselves. There almost certainly needs to be an obvious improvement. Like, it's very difficult to sell this idea to, like, the Italian government, for example. It's like, why? Why would we? But if you go to Honduras and you say to the government, look, this place, which is the most dangerous part of Honduras, Choloma, one of the most, which is near where Morazan is, which is one of the free cities out there. Yeah, we can build this thing if you let us run it the way we want to run it, in a bit more of a free market, so we don't have so many regulations. We can build what we want. We can probably change things around, and lo and behold, bang, it works. People want to live there. Inside the free city, there's literally no crime. Outside, the mafia run the place, and that's good for a country. Not necessarily if you're a socialist government, unfortunately, because that forces them. That's a forcing function on them to be a better government, which they don't really want to. The more centrist and right-leaning governments tend to appreciate that a bit more, because they also see money coming in, investment coming in, and they take a cut of the taxes because you can choose your own tax rate and stuff. But yeah, I would say, in the same, as you said earlier, in the same sense that China used SEZs as sandboxes for economic evolution, I think free cities are sandboxes for governance evolution, and because you get to try anything, and if you follow that out into the far future, hopefully you would have this myriad of experiments happening, and the good ones will win and the bad ones will fail, and then we'll kind of know what the best governance model is.
That's right.
That's the idea.
That's the idea, and I think it's very exciting, and I think there needs to be a lot more experimentation done in small sandboxes, and it's great to see that people are doing this, and that's essentially what I've been doing.
I haven't asked you, have I?
Yeah.
Draper Nation. I don't even know what Draper Nation is. You better give me the 101 quickly. I deliberately didn't look it up because I wanted to ask you, but tell me about Draper Nation.
Yeah, so essentially Draper Nation is a venture lab, and it's probably the world's first governance venture lab. And the idea is to just do a lot of experiments in governments, in different forms of governance, whether it's digital, physical, and just try them, do experiments, and it's a laboratory of experiments.
How does that work, though? First of all, why Draper? What does that mean, Draper Nation?
So, are you familiar with a guy named Tim Draper?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been working with Tim for the last 6 years.
Okay.
And
actually, just say who Tim Draper is for people listening.
Yeah, so Tim Draper is, an iconic Silicon Valley venture capitalist. His family, it's a 3-4 generation business, and I would say some attribute the venture capital business to his grandfather sort of starting the business through setting up the GPLP structure and bringing money from New York to the orange orchards of California, in the 50s or 60s, and setting up this new asset class or this new investment class called the venture capital business. Because prior to that, capital was done through credit or through your commercial investment banking formats. The idea of professionalizing the money of friends, family, and fools, professionalizing that as an asset class was a new thing. So the Draper family is attributed to sort of starting that business. So Tim Draper is, third generation venture capitalist, invested in a lot of well-known, successful companies that are very much oriented towards freedom and making the world a lot more free. So, for instance,
I didn't know that. I know Tim Draper is a sort of figure, is a well-known sort of industrial, a well-known venture capitalist.
Well, he's a wild guy. Right. if you look into him, he's a very, very wild person in a positive sense, very, very passionate, and he thinks outside the box, and he invests in things that are very unreasonable today. And so, for instance, I think his first fame to success was investing in Hotmail, which if you remember, free email at the time was just an insane concept. But
my wife's email address is still
Hotmail.
Honestly, I think a lot of people are like that.
You run into some Hotmails here and there. It ages them for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was the first email account I ever got.
Yeah. It was the first. Well, I think AOL was my first, right. But Hotmail, I had a Hotmail one too. But Hotmail changed the world in the sense it allowed anyone to communicate. So that was, I think, his first sort of like big success. And then after that, Skype, which was video conferencing,
which has just been disbanded.
With Microsoft.
I should make a correction on that, because the other day, I think it was in 2 episodes ago, we talked about this, and I said, how could they go out of business? But actually, they were consumed by Microsoft in a way. So
it became Teams.
Right. So they didn't really go out of business in the sense that they were a terrible business. They more got consumed by a bigger entity.
Yeah. I think it was a positive thing. Microsoft took the IP, and now a lot more people use Teams because of the size. And sort of like to your persuasion, Tim is probably most well known for being one of the earlier investors in Bitcoin. And he did an auction. He bought one of the Marshall auctions and bought a lot of Bitcoins. And this is very early on, I think in 2011 or 2012.
Yeah. Beautiful move.
And he's been a proponent of Bitcoin from the early days. So I think that's in a way one of his, he's very well known for that. And so I've been, I admire him a lot. Even though he's a very eccentric, wild person, I think you need more eccentric, wild people.
What do you mean, even? I like eccentric, wild people.
That's right. Yeah,
you strike me as someone who would as well.
He's a fascinating guy, and I have a lot of respect and trust. And so I've been working with him for the last 6 years and doing all kinds of different experiments. And so Draper Nation is a company, named, I guess, with his last name. But yeah, it's a company that I have built with him.
But so explain to me how you experiment with governance, like in a company, without actually building a city and then governing it or something.
So where my interest is in exploring is not governance models on land, not governance models on sea, but I'm just very curious to see if we can build interesting models in cyberspace. And so that's been my sort of interest that I'm exploring. And it's a very difficult proposition, but I feel that's sort of like my calling. And so the experiments that I would like to do and am doing is very much in cyberspace. And just to give you some sort of baseline examples, one of the earlier, I think, innovators in digital governance was the country of Estonia. Mm-hmm. And Estonia launched this e-residency program, which I'm a big proponent of and have been involved with them for a very long time. And e-residency essentially was, okay, we have this physical territory called Estonia. Everything's digital. How about we open up this infrastructure to people who are not from Estonia? So anybody from around the world could become an e-resident of Estonia, have access to government administrative services like setting up companies, paying taxes. And it opened up the possibility that you could do a lot of these things digitally. So that's sort of like one example of where I think there could be a lot of innovation. And just to sort of give you some basic data points, like 80% of government services can be done digitally, whether it's your pensions, your healthcare, 80% can be distributed digitally. And so that's a big deal. And so then that opens up a country to then provide those services to people who are not from that geography. So that's sort of like the framework where we're pursuing.
Did Tim Draper ask you to do this, or did you just say, look, I'm going to do this, and they sort of?
Yeah. So prior to Draper Nation, I started a company, and Tim invested, and it folded into his ecosystem called the Draper Startup Houses. And this is where I was building physical free cities around the world. At one point, we were in 30 countries, where we would go into very adventurous countries and put up buildings. And these buildings would become small private micronations. And mostly entrepreneurial people, startups would come live, work in these buildings. And it was a complete entrepreneurial ecosystem. So there would be education programs, there'd be hackathons. I ran a venture fund. We would invest in these companies, and they would live and work in these buildings. And so
no degree of sovereignty or anything like that.
There was. It was essentially just a startup house. There was no. It was just a place for people to live and work together. But in essence, in a way, it was sort of like a college dorm, but for startups. Yeah. And so I did that for a very long time, and we put up these buildings around the world. And so that was my first.
Are they still operating now?
Yeah. So we went, at some point we went a bit crazy and we put up 30 of these, then we consolidated. So now.
Did you go to Nagaland?
No. But though, you know what? Interestingly, that thought has crossed my mind.
Dude, come on, you've got to.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you do it in your homeland? This kind of thing, like.
I actually, you know what? It's a very interesting thought, because one of the strengths that Nagaland has, which is completely under capitalized on, is the fact that everyone speaks really good English.
Yeah, you're right.
The young people, they all speak amazing English. Yeah. And I think that's just what a great skill set that is. And so, India forayed into commerce through call centers, right in the 2000s, and everyone would make fun of Indian call centers just because the language and the accent. But Nagas actually don't have an Indian accent. So they speak very well and they communicate really well. I think that's a skill set that I feel like could be used to build stuff. But yeah, the thought has crossed my mind.
Talking of digital governance models, the most fun and interesting one I've heard of recently, which is a guy called Ian Underwood I met in New Hampshire a few months ago, and interviewed him, and he proposed a system, and I'm going to really explain it badly, but he was saying, like, if you look at America and you see Democrats voting and the two sides voting basically, and one of them is always disenfranchised. So why don't you create an online system where you can register yourself and vote for what you want, so that everyone gets what they want? So you basically, if you believe in this XYZ, then you incorporate that into your sort of like your kind of online status. So you can live amongst each other without disenfranchising each other, if you see what I mean. And I've explained it really badly here, but
it's interesting. I think are you speaking of like this? I think there's a term for it called liquid democracy.
That's slightly different. No, this is his own little idea.
Oh, I see.
But I mean, the point is, he was saying, if you look at the voting bloc of, say, Democrats in America, it's the size of some countries,
Sure.
Right. So why not treat it as a country? So why not say, right, as a Democrat, right, for example, so take two different people. One person believes in social security. So one person believes in, we should give money to pay for people who are less fortunate. And the other person's like, no, I'm more of a free market person. I think, people that shouldn't happen. So why shouldn't those two people both get what they want? Why should we force, if the Democrats get in, why should we force Social Security on the Republicans if they don't believe in it?
Right.
So you could just all live amongst each other, and if you're a Democrat, you kind of you're in the Democrat pool online, so you do pay it, but you can't take out if you're on the other side and you're not paying it, you can't take it out. If you see what I mean. He's trying to solve the problem of democracy, which basically means that if you lose, like, you can be disenfranchised as 49.9. Oh no, sorry, that's wrong. You can be disenfranchised, like in the UK at our last election. I think the government won on 20% of the vote of the 20%, not of the kind of people that live in the country. That's the terrible system.
Well, a representative democracy, which is sort of the democracy that we have in the West. I mean, I would say there's certainly question marks whether a representative democracy is the right way to govern. Because you're essentially now electing a group of people to make all the decisions for you. And maybe when you were a small country, maybe that made a lot of sense. But now if you have a country of 400 million people and 4 people now make every single decision for you, maybe it's time to change that. So, I mean, I think a lot of people have written about this, and this is an interesting topic. But I do think that because now we have the ability, because we have technology, everyone has a phone, things like voting on individual matters, individual things, it's just a lot easier. And so why not have people vote on specific issues that are probably more meaningful for them? I guess the UK tried it, I think, with Brexit. I mean, Brexit was a individual referendum, right? It was a one policy referendum. Yeah,
and I think the pushback on that would be mostly it's none of most people's business. Well, like, right. Like what do you know about? Yeah. What do I know about, like, whether we should leave the EU or not? Yeah, I've got a personal opinion on it, but I don't run a country. I've got absolutely no idea. So I find referendums a little bit stupid. One of the guys I spoke to on this podcast just yesterday, it's Patrick Hibbert who's making Veritas Villages. Oh, they have a system which is like a DAO, but they have weighted voting. So within their community, it's not quite been implemented yet. They're just making it now because they wanted to put it onto the Bitcoin network. But say you get 100 votes a year. And you can choose where you put those votes. So throughout the year, the kind of homeowners all vote on things like, do we want to build this? Are we going to allow chickens? Or roosters? Are we going to? And you can choose how much you vote. So you could vote. If you don't care much, you could not even vote. If you care a bit, you could vote one of your votes. If it's an issue for you that really matters, you could put 60 votes in, and that way. But then you'd have less votes to vote on other things. So you have to think about this, because at the end of the year, you reset back to another 100 votes or whatever it is, And I like a system like that a little bit more, because the one vote per person thing is I don't even vote. I don't think my vote does anything. I'm not under any illusions that me voting matters. I think when I've ever voted in the past, it was either cope or just me wanting to make myself feel better.
Right.
Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, you know, which I did in the referendum because
Right.
I wanted to decentralize everything. So I voted against, you know, the EU. But what did it do? Nothing. It's just like, I just felt better the next day when I saw them all squirming in their seats going, oh shit, we lost, you know. But yeah. So how do you test them out then? Like, what's the methodology for testing out something like that?
Yeah. So our methodology is, I kind of see ourselves as an action-oriented think tank in that sense. I don't like the word think tank, but we take action. So we build things, we put them out in the world, and then we see how it performs, and that's how we learn. And so the last experiment we did was we built a digital country, and we put it out in the world. We did some media campaigns, and 100,000 people wanted to be part of this virtual nation. And
No location,
completely virtual.
Okay.
So the idea was, can you build a country with everything in it except the land? And so that was the experiment.
And you got 100,000 signups.
Yeah. And we issued 50,000 passports from people came from every country of the world. You know, there were Palestinians in there, there were Israelis in there were people from every country of the world. And we ended up having 2,000 ambassadors that set up their own embassies around the world. And we did this in a span of 6 months.
Did you take it to anywhere? Because that's a tour de force.
It's a tour de force.
I mean, you know, like digital nomads dream of this because if they get enough people, they can go to governments and say, look, I could potentially bring 5,000 people into your country. Give us a good deal, you know.
That's right. And especially the baseline first principles is that if 80% of government services can be done virtually, maybe an entity that's a virtual entity can provide the services. So that was the experiment, and it was a very, very interesting experiment. 50,000 citizens, and
was that Draper Nation?
That was Draper Nation.
Oh, okay, right.
We called it Draper Nation, but you know we want to do a lot of these experiments. So there were some very key takeaways that I had from that experiment. The main takeaway for me was, wow, it is actually possible. People are interested in becoming part of these types of experiments. And so then hence, I was thinking about, okay, if we were to redo this again, how would we do it? And it occurred to me that maybe there are nations that exist today that don't have their own land. So for instance, Tibet is a very interesting example, right? Tibet, they have history, a language. They used to have land, but they will never have land ever again. It's just not possible. But they have a culture. They have a religion, culture, diaspora. They have an economy. What if you were to take Tibet and put it on the cloud, create a country called Tibet, but there's no land, but it's Tibetans, and you have government services that you provide to citizens of this e-Tibet. And then this...
So a minute, like what? What would a government service be for someone?
Okay, so imagine you go to etibet.com.
Yeah.
And there is healthcare, there's insurance, there's pension, there's a central bank that you pay into that pays you. There is a voting system, there is licenses, home ownership licenses, driving licenses.
This is similar to what I was talking about, actually. So, for example, sorry to butt in, say it was Tibet, which is a really good example, because Tibetans live all over the place.
That's right.
In China, but also in northern India and stuff. Yeah. So you could vote on something like, we're all going to do this, and it would span borders.
That's right.
But they would all act as a whole in a sense.
That's right. So the voting is one piece, an important piece, but I think the more important piece for me is you could create an economy for Tibetans that is cross-border. You could have digital services.
Dude, my mind is just reeling because I'm thinking you basically can redefine borders at will.
That's right. Right. So with Draper Nation, the people who came in were very like startup people because that's the business that we had built before. But I feel people like a diaspora like the Tibetans would be a very interesting, good use case. Or let's take the Kurds. There's Kurds everywhere. They don't have their own land, but there's millions of them. And so if you had a Kurdistan on the cloud, you could potentially build an economy for them. So this is, and the other thought that I had was, there are digital nations today. We just don't call them that. So for instance, Google could be a country, right? They have employees, they have special perks and services they provide to their citizens who are their employees. They have embassies around the world. They have trade agreements. We just don't call them trade agreements. And they have all the components of a country, but it's a corporate entity. So a multinational corporation, in a way, is a nation.
It's probably more powerful as well.
In some cases, Apple is probably more powerful than most countries in the world in that sense. So I think the idea of a digital country, a digital nation, sounds far-fetched, but I have an itch to kind of explore that.
Is that, I haven't dived deep into Balaji's stuff, but is that essentially a network state, or is that different in some shape? Is the network state just the kind of community side of it?
Yeah, so I think there's some parallels, and there's some components of it. Though I think Balaji's, by the way, I love what he's doing. And recently, I hosted the whole network state crew in our office in Singapore. And I love what they're doing. But I think Balaji's concept is essentially that it's going to be groups of people who just network together. But I think the idea of a digital nation it takes it to the next level, where you're saying you could actually create a nation that sits on the cloud, but it provides all the basic services that a government would do. I mean, for instance, Tim Draper usually says this, and I'm still trying to understand it, but he says that a government is essentially a form of insurance. In some capacity, it's a form of insurance. So as a British citizen, if something happens to you somewhere, you can kind of count on your government to well,
I don't count on my government anymore, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. It's a form of insurance. So one of the experiments that I would like to do, and we're sort of researching this, is, can we build some sort of an insurance product? Let's call it a universal earned income, some sort of insurance product that can be sold and can be bought by citizens. So these are all the experiments that we try to do.
I don't know, you probably don't know about this, but it's an interesting experiment. Do you know what Liberland is?
Yeah. VIT.
Oh, you met VIT, right.
Yeah.
Here's my interesting take on the evolution of Liberland, because Liberland started with the idea of a physical piece of land. Gornusiga, it's called. It's that little, you don't need to know why, but it's a bit of unclaimed land. Right? And whenever they go to that bit of unclaimed land, they always have hassle because it's contentious. So the next thing they did was they bought a bit of land in Serbia, which is nearby, which isn't contentious. It's just like buying a property. And they used it as a base to be, where they could base themselves, because basing themselves in what they call Liberland is just too much hassle because the police come on and kick them off and all this kind of stuff. And then slowly but surely, the bit of land that they chose in Serbia is kind of like lots of Liberlanders are living there. And you're like, wait a minute. So, and then you get Liberland. Liberland is also an online community.
That's right.
And you get Liberlanders grouping together in other countries. And suddenly you start realizing, well, hold a minute. The place we have the most hassle is that bit of land that we're trying to sort of like terraform or try and, everywhere else people get left alone, but we're still Liberland. We're still Liberlanders, and I find that really interesting because there's some truth in it. Sure, they want sovereignty, which is the hardest ask in this business that we're in. The hardest ask is complete sovereignty. But they've got quite a lot as well. And I think I have only just noticed it. I've only just started realizing it. I think they probably realized it a a while ago, but I've only just pieced it all together because I went there recently and I was sat in Serbia, surrounded by Liberlanders in this lovely place, and I was thinking, this is Liberland, you know? Right. So it's very interesting, and I'm not. I mean, I don't know whether you've kind of worked out the Free Cities ecosystem, but the network state people aren't very well represented here. We're not really a network state type of thing. We're more like a kind of bricks and mortar, governance type of. We're not massively into the online bit.
Yeah. So yesterday I had this reflection that because the network state community, I'm close to them, and I live in Singapore, which is the network school is across the street. And I recently housed that community in our office. And the reflection I had was, so the Free Cities community seems very much more buttoned up and more pragmatic, right? It's like real estate, free cities, development, SEZs, right? You need lawyers, you need bankers, you need some proper buttoned up endeavors, right?
Yes.
That seems like Free Cities. And then network state community, there's a lot more dreamers, young dreamers who want to do pop-up cities, and they love the idea of building decentralized nodes and all of that. So, but they're usually a lot more younger, a lot more tech oriented, software oriented, and a lot more idealistic. But there's a convergence in between. Where you have a group of people who are a bit of both, and I think I fall into that category.
I'd say that as well, yeah.
And there were some people that I met who were at the Network State conference, and they were here. So I think that middle convergence is actually a very interesting group of people, because you have to be a dreamer and and do unreasonable things, but you also need to be pragmatic. And so I think that middle group of people are people that I think are going to do some very interesting things.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there. I think I've come from the Free Cities end of the pie chart for sure. I came in that way because there's a lot of things that delineate those two groups. Even like Bitcoiners are almost exclusively on the Free Cities side, and on the other side you get blockchainers.
Yeah,
and they don't mix very well. In all honesty, we don't mix very well.
In fact, I was telling Vit, and he was kind of taken aback. But one of the learnings I had from launching this digital country was you actually don't want to use the blockchain.
Great, mate.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to clip that.
Well, because we use the blockchain, and we use...
Which blockchain?
So we built... our passport... system, we built it on top of Base, which is an EVM compatible chain. And we use Fireblocks for our infrastructure. And so we outsourced the safety and security to Fireblocks, which is a great company. And we launched this passport system, and it's a nightmare.
So you're saying that just a database, just use a normal database kind of thing? Yeah.
Well, I say use Bitcoin for money. So that is a blockchain, but just use Bitcoin for money, and for transactions like databases, just use...
Dude, the Bitcoiners are going to love you. We've been saying that for years.
Yeah, just
use Bitcoin. You don't need a blockchain for any of this stuff.
You don't need your own token, and I know Vit is launching his own. He has his own token, etc. Yeah. And I get the desire to do it, so I was surprised to learn. Because I thought, okay, we need our own token, we need to have blockchain to power all the transactions. But the learnings was very clear. You actually don't want to do it. And so I was trying to tell Vit, hey, this was my experience. You shouldn't use the blockchain. Don't do your own token. Just use a database and use Bitcoin for payments. But I think he's gone down that road.
I grilled him on it the other day again. I always do. Whenever anyone uses a blockchain, I will always fight the Bitcoiner corner, which is blockchains are for money. That's the use case.
That's right.
Because anything else that you do doesn't make sense, because it exists in the digital world. Like if you're using NFTs for your land, it's just an NFT. There's no proof that that's connected with the land. Those things kind of don't work. And also, every blockchain except Bitcoin is attackable quite easily. So you're not even getting a kind of foolproof, decentralized way of doing stuff.
Well, all the tokens, they're sitting on AWS.
Yes.
That's just a reality. They're sitting in a centralized server, all of them. And so it's, after 17 years, I think it's become clear that there's a clear winner off the blockchain, and there's no second winner. There's one winner and everything else is like so much behind. Then why not just use that as the money? And then the rest is just community building. I mean, that's essentially it. You're bringing people together, and hopefully you all do great fun things together and have some sort of a identity that you can all rally towards. But essentially that's really it in terms of nation building. So that, anyways, I was trying to explain that to him, but
well, Vit basically came up with he's a Bitcoiner too. I mean, they've got a massive Bitcoin treasury, and they have, every time they generate money, they put it into the treasury. Some of it is a Bitcoin as well. But he kind of had this economic idea to do it this way. What gives those blockchains a bad impression is when people just raise using them, and then just sell back into the market and they go to zero, and that happens thousands and thousands of times.
It's a game, and by the way, through our fund, we've invested in a lot of these projects, and Tim Draper has invested in a lot of these projects as well, even though Bitcoin is our core principle. In the venture business, you want to experiment, you want to try all this stuff. So we have invested in all kinds of tokens and all of that. And I think it's fun to sort of see where it goes. Like, give it a chance, like try it out. But I think it's a game. And the game is there's some currents in the world, there's some energies in the world that's pursuing tokens. And tokens are $1 trillion market outside of Bitcoin, right? So the whole token market is $3.5 trillion, and $1 trillion of that is tokens. So there's a lot of money and the game is you put something out, people invest in it, you sell it back. So it's a game, and I think it's a fun game. I actually think it's entertainment. It's all it is entertainment.
I agree with you, but I would say you're quite rare in thinking it's a game. I think a lot of people think they're buying. I mean, I remember, the big burst of new tokens in 2017, wasn't it? I remember believing a lot of that stuff and thinking, this is, and wanting to know what was new and what was out there and what. But when you watch them all trend to zero in Bitcoin terms after that, and you realize that this is an IPO process, this is how you generate money to start a business. So as long as you can convince people the business idea is good, they will buy your token, and then you already hold half the supply. So then you start selling it back to the market, But meanwhile, the whole thing's trending to zero, and I think the extreme is meme coins. It's like,
meme coins
can
are
I
fun.
get in and can I get out? Right? Yeah, maybe. But if you're a meme coin trader, you're a degenerate, basically, aren't you? You're just into gambling and having fun and stuff. But the whole way that tokens were marketed was definitely not that. It was definitely, these things are changing the world. Blockchains are going to change the world. And a blockchain is changing the world. It's the money blockchain. It's the Bitcoin blockchain.
That's right.
But all the other blockchains are more efficient as just a normal database. You don't really need to do it on a blockchain. I think it maybe in some cases, like a lot of the communities that I visited have implemented blockchain voting, for example. Because you can kind of design it quite easily, and it does give you the option to sort of like use a blockchain. But you can design the same system.
No, the voting on the blockchain. So we built a system that people can vote on the blockchain. It's just not necessary. In fact, it incurs more complexity, more costs, and it's just not necessary. It gets in the way of what you're really trying to do, and I think the aha moment for me was because I launched NFTs. We launched tokens. We've done all of that, and because we've done it, we realized that it's if you look at it as an entertainment value, right? How is it any more different than someone watching Netflix or binge watching a TV show that they love? It's entertainment, and I think the newer generation, people in this, who are 17, 16, 18, I think they kind of see it as a game and as entertainment. And so from a perspective of entertainment, it can be fun. For the older generation, it's not. Right?
Amused.
Yeah.
What's disappointing though is that if you look at like take the example of meme coins. Yes, I see a lot of youngsters like trying their luck on the meme coins, but I think that's sad because they're being compelled to do that because of the way we live these days and the systems we live under. Because they could be long-term thinking. They could be putting that money into Bitcoin for the long term, and in 20 years, they will have achieved something. Whereas when they're meme coining, it's like 1% of them that end up. But it's the mindset, and the mindset is, I'm fucked. I'm 18 years old. I'm fucked. I'm going to try and win 100 grand on a meme coin, rather than being able to think long term and going, do you know what? I'm just going to bit by bit save for the future in a bit of Bitcoin on the side, and that's a great strategy.
Well, that time in history has sailed, and I always tell my wife, and I look at her parents, and they're the perfect example of what used to work and what doesn't work today with what you were saying. So my wife's parents, they're Dutch boomers. They worked for themselves, but nothing fancy. They owned a campsite in Friesland, and they had their own B&B and very basic jobs they did their entire lives. But they were able to buy a house, 2 houses. They're able to save money. They're able to send their 3 kids to great universities, and they lived amazing middle class, beautiful lives. That is no more. And the reality is, in today's system, and it's in China, it's in the US, it's in Europe, if you're 18, 19, 20 coming out of university, that aspiration is not a reality. And that's just the facts. And so when I look at the world and I look at the history of the world, I don't really see the world as cyclical, and I don't really see the world as a linear progression. It's ocean currents, right? Currents come together, they become a tsunami, they become a hurricane, and there's not much you can do when certain currents come together. So I think we live in this turbulent currents where that middle class post-World War II system is just no more, and you can't go back. So this is why I think, to your point, entertainment value of meme coining it's a reality of life, and it's very unfortunate. But this is the new world, I suppose.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Vikram, look, I'm loving this conversation. I could go on for a lot longer, but as you know, I'm on a real tight schedule here. We're at 1 hour, 52 minutes, and I've got 8 minutes till the next guy comes in. And I'm sure there's tons of stuff we haven't spoken about already, because we only just touched on actually what you do after the big Nagaland rant. But I did enjoy that, by the way. That's really, I've never spoken to anyone about Nagaland, I don't think, except in lectures and in presentations and stuff. So it's really nice to chat. But let's finish on that. That was a slightly negative tone. Now. I'd like to end on something positive. So maybe bring your most positive take to the table.
Yeah. So and this is why I love what I do, because I think we can make a big change in the way the system works. And I think the way it's going to, where the needle is going to move is not in trying conventional things. I think you're going to have to do experiments that are just far out. It's just unreasonable. it's the only way to try to build a system where people can have more opportunities. And this is why I think the idea of a digital parallel nationhood just creates so much more opportunities for people all around the world who can tap into this economy that happens virtually. That idea for me is if it works, and there's a lot of ifs, it probably won't work. But if it does work, it will change the way we organize people in the world. I think we change the way economies are built. And I think it will change the way people in the future will have opportunities. So that's why I do, what I'm doing.
I mean, I would say it already has worked. I wouldn't say if it works. I think online communities are the proof that it works. Every single person I work with currently, I met in a digital community. And sometimes we come together, sometimes we don't. But we're for all intents and purposes, we have a very small micronation of people. Right. I think that might even be one of the best applications of the internet, is connecting people. It might be. I mean, it's worked on so many levels already. Even dating apps. So many of these applications are about putting human beings together.
That's right.
I know we sometimes veer too much into the digital side, but I would say that the product's been proven. It's happened. And I love the idea of, I think Tibet's a great idea. I don't know how you could ever get everyone in Tibet on board with that. But
well, so we did a hackathon in Bangalore, and I wanted to do it in India because Dharmashala is in India. And I put it online to say, hey, we're doing a hackathon to build a digital Tibet. The amount of engineers that came for the hackathon from all over India, they just showed up. Yeah. And we did a full weekend hackathon, and it's all publicly accessible on GitHub. All the code it's open source, and we have 12 projects. And people built a central bank, people built a jobs portal, people built a voting system, and it's all there on GitHub. So the tools have already been built. It's just a matter of now convincing some Tibetan authority to say, hey, let's give it your blessing.
Why do you have to? Why do you need someone's blessing? Really, think about it. Especially if it's young Tibetans. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, it'd be great to get a blessing, but in many ways, I feel like the current power structures don't understand this stuff. What might be better is to present to them 50,000 young Tibetans already in a network and say, "Hey, look what we've done," because that's basically how you do things these days, isn't it? You don't ask people to build products and stuff, But I don't know. I think it's always good to. Everything we do is in corroboration with governments. But there's nothing wrong. But a lot of what we do isn't, in a way. If I'm planning something out, I'm not looking for validation before I've created the product.
Yeah. I mean, I know we have to end here, but the next experiment I want to do is I want to build a parallel America on the cloud. And I'm calling it E-America. And I want to build a United States that's on the cloud, and anyone can join as long as you agree to the Constitution. And it'll have all the services. It'll have register your company, pay your taxes, all the government stuff. It will be there. Everything except land.
And will it have the actual Constitution on there, you mean? It's just going to mimic the whole...
It'll be a parallel United States.
Wow.
That's the next experiment that I want to do.
Wow, Vikram, that's great. Good luck with that. That's something I would not be able to wrap my head around. That's the Silicon Valley side of you coming out. I don't think big like that. I think much smaller. I think in small steps. I could never imagine, right, I'm going to just create America on the cloud, That wouldn't work for me, but it obviously works for you. So good luck, mate. And it's been great talking to you. Yeah, I'd love to do this again. I feel like there's a lot of places we didn't go, and it's just pure time constraints.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, many thanks for coming, and good luck with absolutely everything.